Hello.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome to Laughbox.
Laughbox, the podcast for the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. And now, here's your host, Chip Lutz.
Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the podcast. This is Chip Lutz, the unconventional leader, and today I get to talk to Jeff Harry. Man, I am so excited because we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, the integration of leadership and play. This is like a sweet spot for me. So welcome, my friend, to the podcast. Big cheers to you.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Oh, the pleasure's mine, man. Hey, so like for my listeners, because obviously we've talked a little bit and I've been through your website, so I know a little bit about you. But for my listeners, if you give them like the 411, the hot skinny on who Jeff Harry, this man of mystery, is.
Sure. So my name's Jeff Harry. I run an organization called Rediscover Your Play, and I basically play for a living. And when people are like, well, what does that even mean, right? So I always like to tell people this, so when I was in third grade, you remember the movie Big?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I saw that with Tom Hanks, and he got to play with toys for a living. So I started writing toy companies in third grade, and then I just never stopped writing them until I got into the toy industry. And I don't know if you've ever gotten what you've always wanted in your life, and then you're so disappointed when you get there. But I arrived into the toy industry, and there was no play, there was no fun, there were no high fives, there was no toys, there were no kids. And I was in New York, and I just had my, quarter life crisis, and left New York, moved to the Bay Area, bumped into an organization that was teaching kids engineering with Lego. There was maybe seven people, just nerdy dudes. And they were playing for a living. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And they were paying $150 a week. So it was like a joke of a job, but I basically helped them, and we grew it into the largest Lego inspired STEM organization in the country. But the whole time we built it, we had no idea what we were doing. We were just playing. We had no business plan. We picked cities that we thought were fun. We hired people that we thought were fun. And we were just kind of making it up as we went along. And we got so big that because we're in the Bay Area, we got the attention of Silicon Valley, like Facebook, Google, all them. And they're like, hey, do you do team building events? And we're like, yeah, of course we do. Of course we did it. We just didn't know what we were doing, but we just said yes to everything. And we ran them for the next 7 years with these organizations. And one thing I learned, I learned many things, but one thing I learned with a lot of these Fortune 500 companies is they talked about agile, they talked about disruption and innovation and all the buzzwords, but they weren't willing to address the bigger issues that were preventing the place from being a playful place. So they couldn't achieve any of the things that I believe they could achieve, because it wasn't play oriented. So I created Rediscover Your Play to tackle the bigger issues, like how to have a hard conversation at work, how to deal with toxicity at work, how to deal with office politics, how to get your staff in flow, how to deal with inner critic work, all that stuff. Because I felt as if these are serious subjects, but someone should bring some play into these subjects. So now I combine positive psychology and play to tackle a lot of companies' biggest issues.
Man, well, I am super stoked to talk about that stuff. Woo, yes, because I think that there's, theory is nice, but application is what works. I mean, that's kind of how I live my life right there. So I'm really always interested in the application of things. And then, listen to the people that are smarter than me. Usually I figure man, I've been doing this for a while. I just didn't know that was what was the reason it worked. So I'm excited to have this conversation. But before we get into it, I'm just going to ask you I like a random question just to get our conversational juices going. All right. So you got brothers and sisters, Jeff?
I got 2 older sisters.
All right. Your older sisters, when you were growing up, what was the thing they used to torture you the most with? To this day, you're still like, one day vengeance will be mine.
Yeah. So I loved playing G.I. Joe, and they loved playing Barbie. So for every hour of Barbie, we could play half an hour of G.I. Joe. but it always became like 3 hours of Barbie and like 10 minutes of GI Joe. Yeah. And mostly, and I remember this clearly. The way we would play Barbie is I would sit outside the dream house while they would get ready to go on a date, and then the date would never happen. So I would just sit in this car for hours, just hanging around. It was like the worst, dude. And then GI Joe would come visit Ken and be like, "What are you doing sitting in that car? Here, come over and play in the Tetradome." And they'd be like, "We're almost ready." So I remember that. I got a lot of patience with that, but I'm still bitter, as you can tell.
Yes, that's pretty cool. That's cool. I mean, like, I only had one older sister, but we had GI Joes and stuff. And actually, before GI Joes, because we were like 6 kids, so we didn't have a lot of money, we would make paper GI Joes. And when I was a kid, yeah, okay, that was
Yeah, I would paint my Hot Wheels. I did that. I did a lot of painting of Hot Wheels, and badly too. Like Knight Rider had like a big red spot at the front, and it was like, "What is that?" Like, it's supposed to be Knight
Rider. It's awesome. Well, we talked a little bit about your kind of like entryway into the world of play, and I think that's really interesting because I think that we talk a lot about in today's business world, like you said, about innovation and disruption, but nobody really knows. I don't think, for the most part, it's just buzzwords, just like empty words. So let's talk a little about some of the work that you've been doing with companies as far as like really making those words a reality within how they do business.
Yeah. So a lot of times companies hate the word play, right? They're like,
Yeah.
it's frivolous, it has no purpose. And I mean, hey, just to be clear, I define play as any joyful act where you're like fully present in the moment, where it
Mhm.
actually has no purpose, it has no result. You don't have anxiety about the future, you don't have regrets about the past, you're just fully in the moment, right?
Right.
You're in flow, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of companies don't like talking about play, but they love talking about flow, right? They love talking about how do I get the most out of my staff. So usually when we're like, well, why is play important? I tell a lot of organizations, I quote Stephen Johnson, who says, you'll find the future where people are having the most fun, right? And
Mhm.
if you look at the organizations that are having the most fun, those are the ones that are thriving in 2020, right? The TikToks, the Hulus, the Disney Pluses, the Netflix, and the ones that aren't having fun are the ones that will become the next blockbuster. So, like people's ability to, I mean, it's just true, right?
Right.
Like, think about that meeting of Blockbuster when they first came across Netflix, and they were like, this stupid company's mailing DVDs to people. People are just going to steal these DVDs and they're going to go out of business. Like they weren't even willing to experiment or just even be open to it, right?
Mhm.
And you just think of all these archaic organizations, heck, even like, parts of IBM right now. A friend of mine used to work there and then left and was like, man, leaving there and going to some other tech companies, just knowing how like they're just faster, they're just willing to experiment more, they're willing to like make more mistakes. And I've been saying this for a while, whoever is willing to make the most mistakes in 2020 is also going to be the one that thrives the most in 2021,
Mhm.
because they're there, right? And I even reference, I was watching the Amazon documentary. I mean, I don't really like Bezos, but I was still watching it. And early in Amazon's career back in 1998, he was solving some of the most interesting tech issues at that time. So all the tech heads in Silicon Valley wanted to be there, even though he was paying nothing. They just wanted to be there, right?
Mhm.
So I provide that context first. And then when I'm working with organizations, I'm all about figuring out either how to create an inclusive workplace so people want to stay,
Mhm.
because like toxicity costs a ton of money. It actually costs $223 billion over the last 5 years for Fortune 500 companies alone. And
Mhm.
that's only the ones that were willing to admit they had a toxic person, right?
Mhm.
So how do you have hard conversations? So I'll work with organizations like that, and we'll actually practice through play how to have that hard conversation. And then with other organizations, like actually, I just ran that toxicity workshop with the Department of Homeland Security, of all places, right? That was
Mhm.
super interesting. And then with like a biomedical company, I was working with them to just get their staff in flow. Like,
Hmm.
what is the work that they do best? Because if I was to tell any team leader right now, especially in this virtual environment, I'd be like, look, figure out go to your staff like on Monday and go, what is the work that you love to do most? Awesome. Oh, you love to talk to clients, you love to connect with people. What percentage of time do you currently focus on that? Only 10% of your time. How can we get it to 12 to 15%, which is really like just an extra hour or two a week, right?
Hmm.
But doing that would communicate to your staff, hey, I care about you. I'm listening to what your needs are. I'm allowing you to be you at this job, and all those benefits will lead to less turnover, which is what a lot of people are thinking about right now in a virtual environment because they're like looking for other jobs on their Zoom calls.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because like when you're talking about mistakes in 2020, I mean, I look like this, like 2020 has just been one big mistake. So if you haven't made
Right.
if you haven't made mistakes, I mean, yeah,
Right.
what are you doing? Because I mean, it's just been an entire year of, trying, see, hey, let's see if this works. Okay, it doesn't work. Well, let's try this instead. I mean, that
I mean,
you've had to be
oh,
nimble.
sorry. Yeah, but you'd be surprised the amount of companies I come across that are still trying to do the exact same thing that they did in 2019. Like they're not adapting. They're like same type of marketing, same type of sales, same type of, or heck, even worse type of connection over Zoom, same number of meetings over Zoom as they did in person, which just like a lot of that stuff doesn't work. But they're not even asking their staff what will work. You
Mhm.
know, they're just trying to get back to normal. And the reality is we're never going to get back to normal. There'll be a new normal.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, thinking about like the whole virtual world that a lot of us been working within this past year, trying to shift that paradigm and say like, taking the old thing as far as meetings and put them in the new like virtual worlds and making them halfway fun. I mean, how do you even do that?
Well, I mean, first you have to focus on what is your goal of the meeting, right?
Hmm.
Why do we have hour-long meetings? Because some calendar software set that up a long time ago. They don't have to be an hour. They can be 12 minutes. They can be 22 minutes. Like, don't just have needless meetings, right?
Hmm.
I think the next part is then figuring out what is the goal of that meeting. I tell a lot of team leaders the goal of that meeting should be for your staff to leave energized, to leave motivated. Forget about like going through the to-do list. They know what to do. You
Hmm.
can do that one-on-one. I have a friend who is a leader of his department. They just have lunch like 3 times a week over Zoom.
Hmm.
They don't even talk work. And what he's doing there is he's just communicating a certain level of like cultural, like
Right.
he's just focused on culture there, right? Also, we have to take in consideration like positively priming the meeting. A lot of people don't know the first person that speaks at a meeting actually frames the meeting for the rest of the day. And I'm not talking about the actual meeting. I'm talking about the first person on the call. So if someone's talking about their baby and all the fun things that are happening, that actually frames the meeting. But if someone starts with complaining,
Hmm.
then it can make the meeting extremely unproductive. And you don't have to be the leader to do that. Anyone can positively or negatively prime the meeting. So we just have to also be aware of that, right?
That is so
So like don't waste your time, you know, have people leave motivated and positively prime the meeting.
That is so interesting to me because yeah, if I think about it, think about the meetings that I've been in over the course of the last 8 months or whatever, I never really thought about that because if you have, a couple of people on there that are like early birds to the meeting and they're talking about things, it certainly does frame it a little bit differently. Whereas if people on there and they've got like their screen off, they're not saying jack, and then somebody else like,
Yep.
all right, then the
Yep.
boss gets out, so all right, let's get this meeting started here.
Let's get it
I want
started.
to
Yeah.
we got a lot of things to cover. It certainly is
Right.
different. And I guess, because I know that, with emotional contagion, I mean, emotions are contagious, positive and negative.
Yep.
And certainly
Yep.
that I never really thought about that in a virtual environment before, but it certainly, is true that you should really, hey, whoever's on first, have something ready to talk about, engage. Let's have a good meeting. Like, starting that, or if you're the leader, being the first one on to like, frame it, like you said, a little bit differently. I think that would be so important.
I think, yeah, I mean, just also bringing a certain level of shared humanity. I tell a lot of team leaders, like, hey, um, why don't you yes and for the first 40 to 50 minutes of a brainstorming meeting, right?
Uh-huh.
Where like there is no, right? I mean,
Hmm.
they do that in design thinking all the time, where you throw a bunch of stuff on the board, you get as crazy with the ideas as possible, but everyone sees their idea on the board. And maybe in the last 10 to 15 minutes, you then start circling the ones that most resonate.
Hmm.
There's just like, it's subtle things like that. But imagine whenever you've started a brainstorming meeting, by the way, just having a brainstorming meeting in a box, sitting in a box table just is like the worst, right? For
Hmm.
creativity's sake. But being that like we're in the virtual space, imagine doing a brainstorming meeting and the first thing that someone says, the boss is like, that's a bad idea. You've already shut down. It's not brainstorming anymore, right? It's just like, it's poop storming. You're just pooping on all the good ideas.
Right.
So then people don't want to share anymore. You're not going to get the best ideas from people. So you as the leader have to be like aware of what type of energy you're putting out there, you know?
Hmm.
And they've talked about this even at meetings, that there's an uncomfortability that you actually have to sit through in order to get the best ideas. And a lot of times leaders shut down the meeting before then because they're like, okay, enough of this. Let's get back. We're getting too far off topic. And it's just like, sometimes you need to actually go really weird in order to find that best answer.
Now, why do you think that there is all this trepidation for people on doing something different? I mean, just from your experience. I mean, because I know that for me, I'm always about let's just try some different things. Like I grew up in the military, and so in the Navy, anyhow, and that's what I always enjoyed, is that he was always like, hey, well, let's try this. All right. It didn't work. All right, let's try this over here. I mean, we were always just like, we had plans, but we never really followed them. So it was always kind of, it was always something morphing into something different.
Right.
So, thinking about, and maybe that was just me as a leader that, it's like, I'm always about trying something different, but it always seems to me like when I go out there and I talk to people, there's always this trepidation of like, well, we can't try something different. What? No,
Right.
so
Right.
why do you think that is?
Well, I think we're conditioned, right? So I always, people always ask me, why do adults not play enough?
Hmm.
And I always say it's 148,000 no's. And what I mean by that is there was a study done. By the time you're 18 years of age, you will have heard the word no 148,000 times, right? Like 148,000 times, right? And then yes, I believe it's between 8 to 10,000 depending on who raised you. So you start with that foundation, and then you go to school where you're told to raise your hand all the time, you're told to ask permission, and then you have adults constantly shooting on you. You should major in this, you should do this. Think about the amount of times when you were a kid and someone was like, what are you going to do when you grow up? You should actually do this. And it's like, I'm 5. Like, why are you telling me what I need to be doing right now? Like,
Right.
I want to be an astronaut. That doesn't sound practical. It's just like, let me dream for a moment, right?
You'll never
So
make a
so
living doing that.
yeah, okay, I make a living. Like, and I'll get into what that means. But, and then you go to your teenage years and especially now, where you're bombarded by media and now social media. We get more information in a day that people got in 1950 in a year.
Mhm.
Right. So, and all that information is telling you you're not enough. You need to be somebody else. You need to emulate someone else. It's just don't be you. And then people are constantly, I'm sure you heard this in the military, stop being too mischievous. You're being too much right now. You're being too weird. Why do you want to start a podcast? Why do you want to make videos? Like, it's just strange, man. Why are you so
Mhm.
strange? So all that's happening, that it's such a rebellious act for you to play, for you to try something different, for you to be like, hey, let's just experiment, because everyone else is operating from the space of like, is this right? I want to be right. I don't want to look stupid.
Right.
Should I do this? Should I not do this? Everyone is tiptoeing all constantly on these like eggshells, trying to impress one another, when it's just like, I just find that just a waste of time.
I agree, and there's certainly that element of fear for people of being different or looking different or sounding
Yeah.
different, and not fitting within the confines of what the norm is, within, wherever they're working. That is a lot of pressure for people to kind of break out of. And I think that, creating that kind of culture where people don't have that element of fear is really, like you said before, going to keep you from being blockbuster. I mean, that's really the key right there is that, I mean, I've always looked at the heart of innovation as being the absence of fear, that you've got to,
Right.
there can't be, if you're going to innovate, there can't be any fear. You've got to be able to get out there
Right.
and just be as stupid as you want to be.
But in order for people to innovate, they have to believe they can be themselves. And I don't think in a lot of companies people feel they can do that.
Right.
Viola Davis always says this quote, like, with every decision you make, you either claim who you are or you end up chasing your worth for the rest of your life. And like, how many people do you know chasing their worth, like trying to look for external validation? Like, I
Mhm.
always ask people, like, who are you trying to impress right now? Like, if you're trying to impress someone that you won't care about in a year, or in 5 years, then who cares what they think? But most people are like always worried. And if that leader is able to create a space for people to at least be more of themselves, maybe not their full self, but at least more of themselves, they're more likely to share. And I heard this, oh, this bothered me so much. I think it was, they were interviewing top executives back, I think in 2018, and they asked them, I mean, these are like the VPs, right? Like right before the CEOs, they asked them, how many of you are willing to share your top ideas with your leaders? And like 70% of them were like, I don't. Like,
Wow.
so right now we have all these mediocre products. Like, there are better products that could have happened, right? But we're holding the mediocre ones because someone didn't want to speak up, right?
We're just living,
Like, that's where we're at.
we're living in good enough. Hey, this is the good enough.
We're living it good enough. Like
It's
that
good
was a
enough.
dumb idea, but whatever. This phone, like, sharp battery dies after like 2 hours, but whatever. I mean, I have a better idea so it could last 8 days. But no, don't listen to me. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's good enough. It's good enough. It's so funny.
we're living in people are shopping Black Friday for good enough products out there.
It's so sad. So let's talk about maybe some of those things where leaders can do to. 'Cause I want to talk a little bit more because you touched on a little bit about the toxic workplace, and but I think this kind
Yeah.
of tethers nicely into it as far as creating that atmosphere. What leaders can do to really put that into play for put play into play. How do they do that?
Yeah. So first, I always like to preface this as usually the toxic person is also the brilliant jerk, right? They bring in a lot of revenue usually, and I don't know why that happens. Maybe because they bully people into, selling or whatever it is. But
Mhm.
they, a lot of times they're the brilliant jerk. But as Simon Sinek said, when he interviewed the Navy SEALs, they were like, we never picked a brilliant jerk, regardless of how athletic, how smart, how brave. It doesn't matter because it destroys the team. And
Mhm.
you can just see the sports analogies of this, right? Like Ken Griffey Jr., when he left Seattle Mariners, they got really good. Alex Rodriguez, when he left the Texas Rangers, they got really good. You think about that in football as well. Just like, when toxic, even if they're the best player, leave, everyone else steps their game up. So like that's just the context.
Mhm.
And and I mentioned to you earlier about like how much people are losing regarding turnover. So if you think of that brilliant jerk, even if they're bringing in $1 million a year, if 4 people quit this year because of that person, that might be costing you like $1.5 million, in
Right.
turnover, just like due to training and all that stuff. So actually, and I always refer to this person as Chad, it's easiest that way. Chad is costing us $500,000, so we just have to put that in context. So how to address that? There's a lot of different layers to do it. I'll go from easiest to hardest. So easiest is usually that toxic person is taking up a lot of the meeting. They're sucking the energy out of the meeting. And they're probably talking 80% of the time. So whether you're the leader or whether it's a group of people, you organize around that and you're like, listen, we're going to start occupying this meeting. Like, we're going to start taking back this meeting over the next 3 to 6 months. So when Chad cuts off Samantha, we'll be like, whoa, hold on, Chad. Can we hear what Samantha has to say? Like, you just are constantly getting each other's back and making sure that you're occupying that. That's the first thing, because you have to really, it's all about setting boundaries and making sure that you are very clear that this person can't just run amok, because they've been basically doing whatever they want for so long. And a lot of people that first arrive to the company are like, well, I guess the rules apply to everyone, but they don't apply to Chad, right? So you don't want that culture. The second thing is to actually confront Chad directly. And a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. It's just like, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, do that potentially with somebody else. But a lot of times that toxic person doesn't know that they're toxic. They don't know the impact they're having. So when you approach them, you don't attack their character, because that's, I think, what we always like to do, because that makes us the hero in the story.
So you're saying,
you're
saying that going up and say like, Chad, you're an asshole. Everybody knows you're an asshole.
Yeah.
You know you're an asshole.
You're an asshole.
That's not the approach you want.
Thanks for having me. You could do that if it made you feel better, but you're not going to accomplish your goal, right? So you, instead of attacking character, you address behavior and the impact it's having. So you go to Chad and you're like, yo, when you cut off Samantha and, Chip and Jeff during the meeting, that communicated to them all that you didn't want to hear what they had to say. And also you communicated to everyone else at this meeting, you don't want to hear what we have to say. Is that your intent? Is that what you were trying to accomplish? And you never know. You might be surprised. Chad will be like, oh, I didn't even realize I did that, right? Or like, they might be an engineer and just be really bad at communicating and be like, oh, sorry. And then you can actually manage up at that point. But there might be the situation where Chad would be like, yeah, I did that, and F you, I'll do whatever I want, right? So it's like, okay, thank you, Chad. And then that's when you either have to go to their supervisor or their supervisor's supervisor. And not in like a tattletale way, but more in a like, hey, does this person match up with the mission and values of the organization? Because Chad has caused Samantha to start thinking about leaving, Chip, as well as Jeff. They're all thinking about leaving. And frankly, he's already had 3 other people leave because of this person. Is this what we want? Is this what you want? And really tie it to the bottom line. Like, how is this affecting the overall organization, our team specifically, and frankly, everyone's pocketbook, right? And then finally, if they are like, we tolerate Chad, then you have a decision to make as to whether or not that's the right organization, because they support Chad. But then the hardest one to do, this is the most difficult one, is the inner critic, the inner a-hole. So let's say you leave that organization, you go to another one, you might bump into another Chad, and you're like, oh man, they just follow me everywhere. And what's happening is, the reason why that person triggers you is because a part of you believes that. A part of you believes you're an imposter. A part of you believes you don't deserve to get paid as much as him. A part of you believes you don't have anything to say at the meeting. But if you're able to address that internal stuff and be like, wait a minute, I should be paid more than Chad. I should actually be his boss. I should get that promotion. I deserve to be here. The next time that guy is super rude to you, you could be like, Chad, don't ever disrespect me in that way. And when you say that and you set that boundary, everybody else, right, is like, oh, look at that. Chip and Jeff just stepped up to Chad. Like, wait a minute, I'm going to step up to Chad too. And then everyone starts to get more bravery. Everyone starts setting boundaries. And then Chad has a choice. He either changes his behavior or he's got to go.
So a little disclaimer for all the Chads out there that might be listening. This was just used, generically. Like, the person I always use is Todd.
Todd.
But I like that.
Freaking Todd and Chad.
Todd and Chad. But it's so true, because ignoring problem behavior makes it acceptable behavior. that's just it right there. And
Exactly.
people are always going to treat you the
Exactly.
way that you allow them to treat. And a lot of times we think, well, it's just like this. It was like, no, I mean, you got to kind of like step up your game and let people know like what's good and what's not. And I like the
Right. How
leadership.
many organizations have you been part of where like you arrive and they're like this, it's just like this and it's always been like this. And
Yeah.
and then you're thinking like, well, it doesn't have to be anymore,
Right.
right? So, so when I'm running these workshops with my friend Gary, right? And we even ran these in Australia, we saw people laughing. Heck, we saw people crying in these workshops because a lot of people didn't realize that they were not the only ones that left a job because of a toxic person.
Mm-hmm.
So, what we have them do in the workshop is actually practice to have hard conversations. Because if you think about it, we don't get a lot of practice at work.
No.
They just want us to work. They want us to produce all the time. So rarely do you get to practice having a hard conversation. Rarely do you get to practice like failing in that hard conversation because, it's just like, yo, we gotta produce all the time. And that's what we're providing is an opportunity to believe you can actually do it by getting practice the way like a sports team, like a football team practices all week for Sunday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't we be able to get just a couple hours?
Right. Absolutely. Now let's run me through kind of if you were coming in and do some kind of workshop. I mean, like, what does that look like? Because it sounds to me like it would be a lot of fun. But I'm sure that there's a lot of planning that goes in ahead of time as far as like what the objectives are for, what you're looking to get out of
Yep.
it. But how do you build that? And
So I think
are Legos involved?
they used to be, not anymore. When I used to run the team building stuff with my former organization, they were right. But now, like, it's interesting. Depending on what we're trying to address. So if it's toxicity, that's all about hard conversations, and also getting people to a comfortable place to play to begin with, right? If we're running our flow workshop, I do this with my colleague Lauren Yee, and we help people figure out what they love to do when they were a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and then identify the play values that they love to do. Like she loved to do sardines, and we'd be like, "Ooh, what's sardines? Oh, it's reverse hide and seek. Oh, why did you like it? Oh, because it took a lot of communication and collaboration and connection, and it was just kind of funny too, right? So it was like, okay, let's take those traits and let's look at what type of work you do now that does that. Or do you not do any of that work? And if
Mm-hmm.
not, how can we get there? And then we brainstorm a bunch of ways. If it's the inner critic workshop, it's all about like identifying how to hear that inner critic. And then what we do is have people not only write it out and name the inner critic, but we have people actually act it out. So you can see how absurd it is to listen to your mean voice all the time, right? And be like, man, that mean voice, like Gargamel's my mean voice. It's like, man, Gargamel, I got you. Okay, yeah, I hear you. And you don't need to be here right now because, I'm doing just fine, Gargamel. So it's different, right? Each and every time.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole idea is to first get people out of their heads and back into like more of like their body and just like in their senses. And what's interesting is when you get adults to play, they start to see the inner child in each other, and that's when the shared humanity starts to build.
Nice. I really like how you take it back to childhood, because I think about my own like work life experience about like before I joined the Navy, there was a lot of things that I like to do that were creative, and if I think about the time that
Right.
I spent in, the things that I got the most joy from were where I got to explore that piece, even in like creating a form for something, like when word
Yep.
processing first came out, and I got to play around and figure out how to make a form where it was like, oh man, those were the places that I really enjoyed my work. It wasn't the other stuff, but it were those things.
Right.
Even now, the things that I enjoy the most, and where I have flow, where time has no meaning, is where I'm just like putzing around using my creative side on things. So I like that you
Mhm.
brought that out. And I think that there's a great value for people to, even if you can't go to a workshop, sit back and think about some of those things that you used to really enjoy that maybe like have just gotten beat out of you during the course of your work life. And how can you bring
Yeah.
some of those back?
Absolutely. And I mean, and I have two other suggestions if you want to hear them about
Oh
how
yeah,
people can
absolutely.
play more. So a lot of adults don't know how to play because you can't play when you have a lot of anxiety, right? And my play mentor Gwen Gordon would always talk about how you have to soothe yourself, you have to like calm yourself down in order to play. And a lot of times you adopt that from the people that took care of you the most, whoever nurtured you the most. So if
Mhm.
they didn't know how to do it well, then you won't know how to do it well. So that's just, understanding that, right? But then you think about, okay, what calms me down? Like I have some of my best ideas in the shower, right? Other people have their best ideas like walking, running, playing basketball. Other people have their best ideas doing morning pages and writing 3 pages in a row, like, whatever that is, making videos. So first identify what actually soothes or calms you. And then the second challenge is, this is really hard for a lot of people, is I challenge people to get bored, which is ironic for a play guy to say that.
Mhm.
But what I mean by that is like, stop binge watching Netflix, stop looking at social media. And when I say that, I mean stop for a couple hours, not forever, not even for a day. I'm just saying a couple hours, and get like bored, right? The way you got bored as a kid, because if you think about it, your best ideas as a kid came when you were really bored, like sitting in that like uncomfortability. And then you're like, wait a minute, I can leap from this cliff to this cliff. It's,
Mhm.
so you'd have your most dangerous ideas, but you also had some of your craziest, coolest ideas. And then finally, when you get bored, that is when you are starting to strengthen the muscle of being able to hear that inner child, that inner curiosity. And then it's going to whisper weird, strange, fun things for you to do. Like, hey, start that podcast. Hey, make that video. Hey, start a side business, reach
Mhm.
out to that organization you've been wanting to. What's an email or a thing I say this all the time to listeners, like, what is something you've been really excited to do and also so nervous about doing?
Right.
Right. I was just talking to my sister the other day, who like, has dreams of becoming a sommelier, but also is like scared to do it. And I was like, you got to do it. And she's like, no, she's like pushing back on it. Right.
Mhm.
But like, that's when right? That's when So you follow that curiosity and you just kind of see where that takes you. So that's just one of the ways.
Mhm. I like that. Well, and I like that
And then,
you can be that coach for your sister, because so many times you want to step out and do something different, but the circle around you sometimes are the people that are going to like, crap all over you, be like, because they don't want to see you change. They want to see you be just the way
yeah,
you are.
they don't want to see. Yeah, they don't want to see you change. And also the prefrontal cortex is where the inner critic lies, right? So they're actually they believe they're trying to protect you from
Mhm.
disappointment, but they're also preventing you from potentially being fulfilled and fully joyful, right?
Mhm.
But here, this ties into the second challenge. And this is something that you could do with like your 3 to 5 closest friends or family members, the people that know you the most. You reach out to them and you ask them these 2 questions. What value do I bring to your life? Because I think a lot of people have forgotten or never have ever heard what do they do for people. So like, what value do I bring to your life? Like, why are we friends? Like, what do I do for you? Right. And you just hear that back. And then the other question you ask is like, when have you seen me most alive? And another way of asking that is like, when have you seen me most present, most happy, most fulfilled, most playful? Like, however you want to ask it. But it's like, when have you seen me most alive, and what value do I bring to your life? And when you get answers from those 3 to 5 people, it is a fascinating discovery to see how people see you. And a
Right.
lot of times you're like, oh man, I didn't even think about that. That's how I got the name of my organization, Rediscover Your Play, because people were literally saying like, you helped me rediscover, who I am. And other people were like, you give me permission to play. And then I was like, rediscover your play. And they were like, yes, that's it. So like, all those answers, between you following your curiosity and hearing your friends give you those answers back, gives you so much information as to how to play.
Oh, that's great advice. I mean, that's how I got the name of my business, Unconventional Leader, as well. As I went back to all the people that I'd worked with, like, what was different about working with me? Like, well, you were so unconventional. You just did things different than anybody else I've worked with before. And I was like, oh, okay, great. I never thought that I was all that
That's so
different.
cool.
I never thought that I was all that
Right,
different,
right.
but evidently I was. So
Isn't that interesting how people, like, we don't see it,
right.
right? Like, I don't see how I play, and you don't see how you're unconventional, but so many other people do. So
Mhm.
when you first were told that, what did you think? On top of like, I didn't know that.
I made me sit back and kind of rethink about some of the people I had worked with, and it's like, well, did I do things different from them? And maybe really think about my processes and how I go through things, and really and it really was a little bit different. It's kind of like an aha realization moment for me that I was a little bit off.
In a good way, though. In a good way.
Yeah, in a good way. In a good way. Well, I tell you what, my friend, I have really enjoyed talking to you. It's been talking to my long lost brother here, because so many things you say absolutely resonate with me. But I want to make sure that people know how to get in contact with you. So if they're interested in getting them a little more Jeff Harry, where do they need to go?
Absolutely. Just simply go to rediscoveryourplay.com and click on the Let's Play button, where I have all these play experiments. And then also you can hop on a call with me where we can figure out how you can play more to kick ass in this world.
Awesome. And I'm a firm believer that one person can make a difference, that you don't need to be in a leadership position to kind of start that movement wherever you're at. And I would think that your ideas would parallel that, if you want a little more play, take charge.
Right. Just know you can start a meeting, you can do crazy stuff, and just experiment and see what happens.
Nice. Very nice. Well, if we were really at a bar, having a beer, I'd give you some kind of drunk dare. But since we're not, I'm just going to ask you a few random questions from my overstuffed Would You Rather book. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. Are you game, Jeff?
I'm down.
All right. I always apologize in advance because I never know where the book's going to open to. All right. So,
sweet.
Question number 1, Jeff, would you rather immerse your naked body in a bathtub of cockroaches, or dive headfirst into a pool of chewing tobacco spit?
Oh no, the spit all day, man. Oh, cockroaches. No way. Never with cockroaches. Oh, I think of Indiana Jones, Temple of Dome. Oh, when he put his hand in that. Oh, I was like, nope.
Yep, I'm with you on that. All right. Would you rather, second question, eat 15 feet of aluminum foil or swallow 6 steel guitar strings? 15 feet of aluminum foil or guitar strings.
Eat aluminum 15 feet? That's so weird. Maybe the guitar strings, because you could put spaghetti sauce on them and pretend they're, like noodles.
I like your logic train on that. You're like, oh,
you know what I'm saying? Let me put some meatballs in here and then I can pretend that they're noodles.
All right. Last question. All right. Would you rather have an eyelash permanently affixed to your eyeball, or a prickly burr permanently poking into your heel?
A prickly
burr
poking. What's a burr?
It's from a sticker bush. Think about that. Like something always poking in your heel, like from a sticker bush.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, that's tough, man. Oh, because I would hate the thing in my eye. No, I don't want to affect my eye. No, I'll take the thing in the heel. I'll just I'll just skate around on it all the time.
Okay, I like how you kind of have a serious logic training going through these. That's
I have a serious logic training. I'm just I could wear those wheelies. I could wear those wheelie shoes, and then I never have to push.
Go through all the possibilities in your head. Hey, well, thanks so much for spending some time with me today. Like I said, I really enjoyed our conversation. A lot of fun for me. I got a lot from it, and I know my listeners will too.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Laughbox. If you'd like to learn more about AATH, visit our website at www.aath.org or email the host at chip@unconventionalleader.com. And if you'd like to be particularly awesome, leave us a review on iTunes. Or tell your friends about how awesome the podcast is, unless you didn't think it was awesome. And then just keep it your little secret. Or tell them it was awesome and then laugh to yourself about how you're going to be wasting an hour of their time while you're out doing something productive, like handing out heads of cabbage at a Miley Cyrus concert. Thanks again for listening, and may the farce be with you.